Good to go? Okay. All right. All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Eric. I'm here to talk about how I learned to stop worrying and love the developer. How do I do this? There it is. Sweet. So, about me, I have about 15 years of software development experience, a little splattering of general IT mixed in with some InfoSec experience from managing a PCI requirements program for a restaurant group. And solely for the past 2 years, I've been focused solely on security from a pen testing role. Yeah. Yeah. I'm horrible with mics. I warned them. All right, is that good? Good? Okay. I'm also microphonically challenged. I did warn the sound guy before I started here, and I warn everybody before I start. Let's see. So for the past 2 years, I've been focused solely on security. Started as a application security coach, teaching teams like that have problems to try to get them to learn from their problems. You know, instead of making general SQL or dynamic SQL statements, you know, parameterize your queries. Maybe you should filter your input and everything. You know, uphill battle basically. And I've been doing pen testing solely for the last year. I was born and raised by technology. Kevin, the guy here before me, penned the term, I was a pre-maker maker, which makes me sound like a hipster, but I do not ride a fixie and my jeans are not very tight, so that kind of throws it across. I also think I'm kind of cool, but and you can follow me at Twitter, which I don't really use anymore, and it's also not safe for work, so maybe you shouldn't follow me if you're following me from work. I'm a bit sarcastic and abrasive. So what this talk is not about, I am not going to be suggesting tools, I'm not going to be bashing tools. I could probably do that for hours, but I'm not going to do that. As a matter of fact, I'm not even going to mention them. Maybe I'll mention some of them, but not by name. I'm also not going to talk about formal or structured, well-known approaches. If you want that, then you should go study for your CSSLP. That's got lots of good information, and I'm going to be doing a lot of bashing, or actually, I'm not going to be doing a bashing about developers and security teams in general. Actually, I am, but you know, that's the way it happens. So let's talk about the general issues here. So developers, and this is partially our fault too. Are there any developers here? You don't count. You don't count. You don't count. All right, you count. Okay, so you know, basically developers, you know, they lack training and general knowledge in InfoSec. You know, the OWASP top 10 has not changed, you know, for the most part since they started tracking. I mean, yeah, we don't really have to deal with Stack Overflows anymore, but that's more of a function of the tools and the tools that everybody uses, so it's not really an issue anymore. You know, they're driven by business needs. You know, security's not driving them. They're not focused on security. Security is an afterthought. What's driving them is the business saying, hey, we need a feature that does this, and we need it now, and we need it done then. And that's what really drives them. Work long hours and tight deadlines, especially at release time. I cannot tell you the number of times that I have spent like working 80-hour weeks towards the end of a release cycle, and it gets horrible. And developers also see security as antagonizers, and part of the problem there would be it rises from an ego perspective. You know, if you write something, you pour your heart and soul into it, you know, you don't want to hear somebody say, oh, this is bad, this is horrible, I can do this, I can do that, you know. So that's part of the problem there. Security, we are frustrated from seeing the same issues day in and day out. I mean, how many years have we been seeing SQL injection on the top of the OWASP top 10 there? You know, and it hasn't changed, they haven't learned, which of course is a function of lack of training. But anyway, lack of understanding for the most part for pen testers, because they really haven't worked the development cycle. We in general don't understand the stresses that most developers have to deal with day to day, especially in a release cycle, especially when you're getting down to the bottom. The last thing whenever you're trying to figure out a QA problem is, are you going to really worry about, you know, creating a SQL injection, creating a cross-site scripting error, you know, whenever you need to get a product done and you need to ship it, whether that's like, whatever your life cycle is, whether you're shipping a physical product or whether you're throwing it up on a web page. You know, the last thing you're going to do is that. So that's something that security doesn't really understand. We're focused on finding the issues as opposed to preventing them before they even happen. And again, that's partially a problem of training. And then we're also bad at getting buy-in and engagement from our customers. Our customers here aren't necessarily the developers. Our customers are actually the businesses that drive the development here. So we're engaging with the developers, we're engaging with the app managers, but we're not engaging with the businesses that really push the features there. So like if we could get buy-in from the businesses other than just being antagonistic, like, oh, we need to address this, blah, 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 how are we going to fit this in whenever we got all these business needs? So, and again, here's security perspective, same issues day in and day out. We deal with a lot of frustration. Sucks finding SQL injection again and again. They kind of fix it maybe, and then, oh, wait, I just changed the case and I'm able to still get SQL injection in there, so they kind of understand what they're doing, but not really, because I can get past them every time that they do something that's a horrible fix. And we're also playing catch up with existing applications. Horrible stuff, lots of legacy applications out there, even before security teams came in, even before anybody had any training on anything. They're all out there. The issues are discovered in production, and unfortunately, they've been in production for years. We're also dealing with slow response times and issues not getting addressed, which leads to even more frustrations. Like the number of times I've seen issues ranging from critical to medium to informational not get addressed, or even if I just see informational findings get addressed, just to make themselves look good, like, oh, this quarter we closed 20 items, and they're all informational. It leads to a big game here. Everybody likes to game the system, make themselves look good, and that's the easy way to do it. And from the developer's perspective, they're driven by business needs. Don't control what goes in, don't control when, don't control how. All that they have is, a deadline. Look, we need this, and we need it then. And of course, there's no security functionality written in there. Like, if I have this form, if I have this form, it queries the database. We need to ensure that it does not contain SQL injection. Sorry. So they don't control it, they just control how they write it. It leaves an awful lot up in the air to the developer at the end place, So if we don't have the requirements for developers to do it, they're not going to write it, basically. They're going to write it to the best of their abilities, and if they aren't aware that SQL injection exists, which of course they should be, but they're often not, it's going to be in there. Lots of times developers are highly skilled and they focus in on one set of technologies, be that .NET, be that Ruby. They have their specializations just like security people do. There's SOC people, there is pen testers, there's people focusing on cryptography. They focus in on that one thing and they do it, and that's it. Tight deadlines. User acceptance testing and QA is at the end of the cycle, so usually bugs are not found then. And even if we started doing pen tests before it got out to production, that's more than likely where we would do it would be QA. That's whenever the developers are working like 80-hour weeks. They're trying to get everything done, trying to get it shipped, and most likely fixing last-minute bug fixes. Probably the line of business has completely changed the entire scope of everything, and it doesn't work. Sorry, bug. And it doesn't work, and so everything has to be rewritten, hence working 80-hour weeks. With development teams, and it's no different than any other IT things, there is constant turnover with new grads, and then because of lack of training, everybody is repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And it even gets worse and amplified with critical and legacy code bases, which has no one maintaining them or has any idea what's going on. The person who wrote it, and it's used in everything, has moved on a long time ago, and it just works, so let's not touch it. So, the best idea for this is, if you're going to do a pen test on a brand new system, you're going to attack the login system first, because that's likely the first thing that was written. And usually, you put that in there because everything depends upon the user privileges. You need to log in and you need to do something first. So you're going to write that first, and a lot of your mistakes are going to be there. So you can write a system and be like, oh, well, I'm just going to put in passwords in plain text right now. I'll go back and I'll change that later because I know it's a bad idea. Well, you go back, or you have it written and then you just forget to go back. So, it's the same idea as that. Hopefully nothing's that bad, but I've seen some bad things. A lot of times developers follow a well-defined yet poorly executed life cycle. We can all pretend that, we all follow the Waterfall model or we all follow the Agile method. But in the end of the day, everything gets tossed out the window. And then as much as I like Agile, a lot of people tend to focus more on following the process as opposed to actually shipping a product. So there's a lot of problems with that. And then, of course, I keep saying it again and again, lack of knowledge, training, and higher level focus on security issues. They just don't know what they don't know. And of course, they take it personally. So our working relationship. Developers see security as antagonistic, bounty hunters, and conceited. And then we as security folks see developers as lazy, ignorant, and also conceited. I just want to point out something that we're all kind of conceited. What are you doing? That's right, we're all conceited. I'm going to say it. Nobody else wants to say it, but I'm going to say it. So let's think about some ways that we can work around this. And of course, I'm coming at this from the security perspective. I'm not coming at this from the developer's perspective, even though that's where I spent the bulk of my my professional life here. It's trying to, pass the wisdom to security of how horrible it is to be a developer. I mean, it's wonderful. So in the developer's life cycle, for the most part, everything is either Waterfall or Agile. So basically, here's how the developer's workflow is for Waterfall. The Waterfall method, basically, somebody who is completely detached from the development lifecycle altogether, like a business analyst, somebody who hasn't written code in 15 years, goes out, talks to the business people, and they say, we need to do this and this and this. And they're like, okay, let's write it up. And they turn this, something that can be summarized into 5 sentences, and they write, documents that are 20 pages long. Basically, and then they pass it off to the development teams. They're very large, very well-defined, huge scope, and massive work requirements because of the average waterfall life cycle. I don't even know how it is, but it's probably about 3 to 6 months. So you come up with enough projects to fill developers' time for 3 to 6 months, and you code, and at the very end, QA comes in and tests everything. And then by the time you find the bugs in QA, you totally forget what you wrote months ago because they found the bugs, and you have to rewrite everything. Security, if they are engaged at all, it would also be come in at QA, as opposed to coming in at the requirements, saying, hey, let's, when we do this, maybe we should consider, SQL injection. Let's filter user input, So basically, we would come in at the end and say, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? And then, of course, the developer has totally forgotten what they did at that point. Because when I was writing code, I would totally forget what I wrote last week, let alone several months before, especially in a waterfall thing. You're a developer, am I out of the ordinary there? Or no. It's
what I did yesterday.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. It's unless yesterday I was working on the same thing, and I usually leave notes for myself, but usually it's cursing myself out, but I couldn't think of anything else to do here, so I'm sorry. It's apology for the next person, but usually there's apologies for myself, Oh, what did I just do right there? Okay, in Agile. Agile is a little bit easier. It's better for us as security people in order to break into there. So Agile attempts to break what you'd normally work into a waterfall cycle, and it breaks it down into very small iterations. So if you took a whole feature, let's say we take a one-page document in order to address this feature that they want. The management team, and by management team, I'm talking the higher up, the project manager, not the project manager, but the application manager, senior development, would work with that and break it down to smaller and smaller work groups until you could say, okay, I can finish this feature in 2 weeks. So you take that one feature, you break it down, and you work on that. So it is an iterative. You're not going to complete everything on every cycle that you do on Waterfall, but you could, in the same amount of time as a Waterfall, create those features, but you're working on much smaller things. So you every 2 weeks you would ship code. Like I said, most development cycles last 2 to 4 weeks. So I can't think of a good example, but you break it down, and each one builds upon it. So the large features are split into smaller and smaller tasks until the whole feature can be completed on time. Daily meetings are had to report progress and issues from the previous day, and that's a hint that I put in there. QA also occurs as the feature is finished, which is just 2 weeks. And like we just said, we totally forget what we did last week, let alone months ago. So the reason that I pointed this out for the daily meetings that are here to be reported every day, and is that is a great place for security people in order to like hook up and address issues before they even get to QA and before the whole rest of the system is even built on it. So you find the mistakes, you find the issues, and you are able to sit there. So like the daily meetings, you're the only developer, you don't count. Any other developers? Like, is anybody else familiar? Okay, is anybody else familiar with Scrum? I mean, okay. Okay, so most non-development people are not familiar with Scrum. So a Scrum meeting is basically every day you have to call in. It's supposed to not last more than 15 minutes. The people who are involved with the project say, okay, this is what I did yesterday, this is what I'm going to do today, and these are the issues that I'm having. The best idea, if you are aware of the features that are going to take place in the Scrum, you know that there's going to be something where security should address something. You can sit on that meeting, listen in, and if somebody says, you know, I'm working on this login thing, and I'm not sure how I should, you know, handle encrypting the password. There's a buzzword right there, encrypting the password. So you write down, you write down the user's name. You're not supposed, like you as somebody who's not participating in the Scrum are not supposed to talk, but you could write down that person's name and then reach out to them after the Scrum and say, hey, developer Joe, you know, I heard on the Scrum today that you were having an issue and you wanted to know how to encrypt your password. Well, let me tell you, one, we shouldn't encrypt the passwords ever, and two, have you looked into hashing? And like, why don't we sit down and talk about this and come up with the best solution here? Because we can't expect the developer to know the best situation. Every day, every minute of the day, the developer is coming up with new ideas all the time, and because they lack the background in security, you know, they are not going to have the best ideas because they don't have the background, and that's not their job, that's our job. So I mean, we could blame them, but we probably shouldn't. We should blame ourselves. So what we're doing wrong, at least as far as I've noticed, we are relying upon bottom-heavy tools. So we try to implement large tools, especially on legacy code. It might not be so hard from a new development perspective, but especially from legacy code, we run tools that generate hundreds of pages of reports and say, oh, you need to fix all this, and like, let's fix it now. So you give that to any development team, they're going to flip through it, skim everything, throw it in the garbage, and say, oh yeah, we're working on that. So we need to not rely upon bottom-heavy tools. We should not try to offload all of our work onto the development teams, and we need to engage them and basically try to work together with them. Issue tracking, I mean, it's the same idea as what's generated from the bottom-heavy tools. Without input and outreach, issues will never get addressed. So we could pen test everything. We could run static code analysis, dynamic code analysis, and just pass off reports, but if we are not engaging with anybody, you know, we're doing something wrong because they have nowhere to go, and like I said, there is no, in general, dev teams do not have any security awareness or not much security awareness. At my last development position, I was like the only secure aware person. I found SQL injection after SQL injection. I brought it up with the team over and over again. And I said, you know, I'm finding this here, I'm fixing it, but we need to stop doing this. And people are like, oh, I do that all the time. I'm like, well, maybe you shouldn't do that anymore. But it still went on, you know. So even if there's a secure aware developer on a team, they can't really make much headway either. So we're going to have to like find other ways to engage with developers so that they know that they can reach out, you know. It's not I mean, it is their fault, but it's not necessarily their fault for not knowing the proper way to do anything. And then also working in a vacuum, this goes back to the outreach issue. There's a huge disconnect between security and developers in general, and they don't really cross lines. Where I am with my current pen testing job, I rarely interface with the developers. I mainly interface with the app managers and hire. I mean, I do have meetings with them whenever they're like, I don't know how to stop a cross-site request forgery. Can you help me? I'm like, oh, of course, yeah, I'll totally work on that. But it's very rare from that. And also, if the teams don't communicate to me, and I think it's partially because they don't know who to communicate to, you know, I send the reports to the app manager, and the app manager sends it down, but they don't say, oh, well, this team found out, why don't you reach out to him, you know. So a lot of it's communication. People don't know where to go. All right, so what also we're doing wrong is a big one, and it's unfair. And I think it's not necessarily driven by security, but the perception is that we're looking for a sudden drop off from like 100 issues down to 0. At least that's what I've noticed a lot of dev teams think, and obviously it's because I'm not dealing with them directly, but it's unrealistic for anybody to just go from like 100 to 0. And I don't think anybody would say, oh, we expect you to have no more vulnerabilities anymore. And that's never going to happen. But from the team's perspective, and what it is the management pushing on it is, because, people are pushing on managers, they're not going to get their bonuses, blah, 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 blah. And basically that's what it comes down to. Like, we need to close these issues, we need to close them now, blah, we need to look better. So it's like, I think that we basically need to work with the lines like the businesses, the business managers, to try to get them to be a little more realistic. And I mean, there needs to be something there, like, fix these issues, you get a bigger bonus or something, but like they can't try to make it be 0, because not only one is that not going to happen, it adds to us getting ignored, and then it also adds to us getting ignored. And I forget where I was going with the third point, but but it just helps, like, create the headbutting between developers and security, because it's just not going to happen. All right, so what I'm saying is that fixing the major problems starts with understanding from both sides. So security folks, especially pen testers, anybody who deals with vulnerabilities and all that good stuff, we have to understand the drive, what drives the development life cycles, what's the daily stressors from the developers, and also what the problem is. And like I'm saying, I think a large portion of the problem is horrible requirements, like requirements that don't have security requirements written into it, as well as complete and total lack of training from the developers, which could be total lack of experience, complete turnover, to also just not caring at all one little bit. So how can we fit our needs and processes into the developer mindset and the workflow? And then how can we also better engage the businesses, which drives the development to address our security needs? And the sooner that we find the issues in the development lifecycle, honestly, the better. So how can we fit security into development? Look towards automation. I am personally a huge fan of trying to find non-intrusive processes that would automatically get built into a development lifecycle. Basically, any process that a developer is used to, and try to fit it in with as little intrusion, as little as extra work as possible. Because anything that has extra work on the development teams is not going to get adapted. Like I said before, we could send off 200-page reports to the development teams, and it's just going to get ignored. It's just going to get thrown away because nobody has time for that. And I mean, I'm coming at it from a security perspective, but I can see their point, because how are they going to fit that in whenever you have the people who are actually paying the bills for you, whenever the product is the one that's driving the business, and then all of a sudden you've got security is just a big pain in your butt. How can you get the teams to be engaged on that? Basically automation and integration is key here. You have Jenkins, you have like a static code analysis or something, or you wrote your own, you have your own unit testing that looks for the low-hanging fruit for security issues, and you do the automated build and it rejects the build because you found something. That sends something to their IDE, the developer comes in and goes, oh no, I did something wrong, what's that? Oh, okay, I'll fix that and we'll do a build again. Boom, you have a security issue addressed right there before it even goes to production. The best place for this, at least in my mind, would be whenever you're doing elevations into different environments. So like if you're on dev, you do the elevation into QA. Oh, we're not going to let it go into QA because I found like a low-hanging fruit of cross-site scripting here. Address this cross-site scripting, fix this error, and then we can go. So, at least we're not going to find the big things, but we can find the low-hanging fruit and hopefully have the developers think in the long run, because they're like, well, I want to make sure this goes to QA, so let's get this in. And again, finding the issues sooner in the development cycle. Again, I'm not going to suggest tools. I'm not going to badmouth tools either. But can we identify tools that finds the issues even before checking in or before escalation of the code? And then also, basically relying upon the teams to mark false positives is not going to work, because nobody has the time for that, unfortunately. If we give a 200-page report, Nobody's going to have time to do that, and it's just going to get ignored. And that is unfortunately a simple fact of life. You know it too. I said you know it too. Okay. So training. This is our own fault. Developers are taught to solve problems in languages and platforms that the vast majority of security folk do not know anything about. Focused in on data structures, focused in on how long it takes to do something, and make it quick, make it scalable, and here you go. Sorry, I got a cold. And are we doing a good enough job explaining? That's a nice spacing there. Are we doing a good enough job of explaining the risk of what we're talking about? You know, like cross-site scripting. You know, I pop cross-site scripting all day, every day, and you know, I'm popping alert boxes that say 1, but you know, I cannot tell you the number of times that I've had to field the question was like, yeah, okay, you're making an alert box pop up with 1, but what's the real risk here? So are we doing a good job of explaining the risk? You know, say, yeah, I'm just doing this as a proof of concept. I just showed you that I can inject my own code into your application and do it. So like, let's say that I spent a bunch of time, wrote some JavaScript, wrote some CSS, and I put something over your login box all of a sudden, like, and I have all your passwords. Like, do you see the problem then? Like, oh yeah. So you know, there's a different of engagement between popping an alert box and saying, oh, you got cross-site scripting, and then explaining the real risk to it. Because again, developers just aren't quite that all aware of what could happen. They just like, oh, what's an alert box? Whatever, I don't care about that. So are we engaging our audience, or are we talking down to them? You know, like, are we like shaking our heads because we found another SQL injection? You know, I'm tired of finding SQL injections. Everybody's tired of finding SQL injections. So are we talking down to them because it's a well-known issue, or are we trying to educate them? Are we trying to sit down to their level, understand their issues, and carry on? And I hate to say this, but I've sat through hours and hours of development-centric training, and I found it lacking. I've sat through general training. I've sat through language-specific training. I've sat through blah, 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 and blah, 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 and it's all horrible. So how can we make this better? And hopefully I can talk about that. So we're going to talk about trying to identify tools for the development team. What I greatly prefer would be transparent and lightweight. Again, IDE integration, automation capabilities, which is great for DevOps. You know, no extra processes on the developers. I cannot stress that even enough. Heavyweight tools can be run at each environment escalations. Again, how can we catch issues earlier without putting all the work on the developers? Because we kind of have to catch that. And next we're going to talk about engagement. So who should we be engaging? At least I do, and I'm not going to say that all pen testers deal with this, is I deal with the application managers and the CIOs. You know, something flows downhill, you know, and that's basically at least what I deal with. I forget what that something is. I don't think it smells very good. But who do we actually need to engage? So obviously we need to engage with the developers because they're the ones who are going to actually be doing the work. But in addition to developers, I think we would do us a big favor by engaging the lines of business so that they can understand the risks and understand that, yes, we view it as important that you need to have these new features developed, but we also have to have a balance here of addressing these issues, making sure new issues do not pop up while still doing this. So we can create new features for you, we can keep bringing in the money, we can keep paying the bills, but everything needs to get addressed. I mean, it doesn't have to be addressed tomorrow, but let's figure out a balance here. So if you can create a good working relationship with them, I think that you can do it. QA, I don't think anybody has thought about engaging QA, but especially as pen testers, like, why don't we have them do some of the light lifting in the pen tester position? Train them to go after low-hanging fruit of cross-site scripting. Have them trained to do the low-hanging fruit of SQL injection. You know, before it gets to production, have them do the easy test for us, so I don't have to do it. You know, like, oh, you found cross-site scripting. I think you know what the issue is here. You know, cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, SQL injection. I don't see why somebody who's not specialized could not find that, especially QA. So let's train them. business analysts, the people who actually write the software requirements. Let's get them, try to figure out how to train them or engage them so that they can include our security requirements from the stat or start, which would be even better than that. So here are some ideas for engagement. I'm focusing in more on the developer. Of course, like I said, that, I think we need to engage QA and business analysts, but this would be a good start, and perhaps we can include them on this. Some of my ideas would be things like a developer roundtable. Like, think about the spoken wheel model used in airlines. So, on every app team, hopefully every app team, but I'm sure on app team to app team, there's somebody who's more security focused or has more security awareness than that. If we can engage that one single person on each app team, or even if it's every other app team, just you need to start somewhere. Somebody who has an interest in security, and maybe like once a month, once a quarter, get all these people together and teach like a quick lesson. Like 1 month it could be like cross-site request forgery. Next one would be cross-site scripting. And the idea is to train them to become the point of contact for their team, so that if somebody on their team says, "Oh, I'm having a problem with this form. I keep hearing that a cross-site request forgery. I have no idea exactly what that is or what the real risk is." One, they can either go to that person on the team, and that person can show them the risk, show them how to address it, or else that one person on the team says, "Well, we haven't really covered that yet, but I know exactly who to talk to about that." So basically, it would free them up. They would know somebody who to go to whenever questions arise, and by engaging like one developer on the team, you can send out the knowledge to the rest of the team, and it would go back. And again, the person on the team is not going to know the answer, but they're going to know who to go to get the answer on it. And then we should also work on embedding ourselves into the software development lifecycle early and often. Waterfall is horrible. I wish I had better ideas on where to engage in that, but it is a horrible nightmare. If anybody has any good ideas, I'm all ears. But anybody who's using Waterfall should probably be beat. That's just my opinion. And Agile has many points where we can remain hands-on or hands-off, yet still be helpful. So, writing the requirements, listening in on Scrum meetings, looking through the project backlog, adding in our own little notes and features, before it gets assigned, saying like, "Oh, this looks like a security risk. I know that this is coming up. I should listen to the Scrum." I was like, "Oh, this is a security risk. Make sure that this, and this are addressed." So have that be part of the user story that they're going to work on before the user even comes on. If you know that the developers are going to be working on a security-focused feature, sit on the Scrums. Know who's talking. Engage them outside of the Scrum. All right, steps to making it better. Training. Let's stop making it boring. Most training's focused in on remediation of the issues. Developers don't know the risk or how to exploit it. If we could come up with some sort of training, I've thought about this, slightly kind of working on it, but I'm also pretty lazy too. So take something like WebGoat, for instance. Like, we all know WebGoat, it's very vulnerable. Create some sort of criteria, or not criteria, but some sort of curriculum based on WebGoat. Say, okay, look at this page. This is vulnerable to SQL injection. Here is how you would exploit the SQL injection issue. Now, how would you fix it? Make them fix it. I personally think that good developers can learn any language. So I'm not very language-centric on this. Java, .NET, whatever, it doesn't matter. A good developer would be able to fix it, find the issue, exploit the issue, and make them fix it. Run unit tests against it to make sure that the issue is fixed, and give them a good score on that. So instead of having to sit through an hour training on cross-site scripting where, I could run Fiddler and then figure out what the right answer is, actually test them against real code, have them exploit something and have them fix it. So then that way they can see what they can do. They can even play around with it before they fix it and be like, "Oh, I've done that lots of times." Because I'm a really good developer, and I've never written anything that could possibly be exploited anywhere. Anyway, all right. Like I said, integrated training. Actually, that's everything. Wow, I didn't need an hour. So basically, we're all the problem. We're all on the same team and working for the same goals. And we need to align our security issues with business goals. Without them, there is no security. I left this open, but there's not very many people here because I'm looking for discussions or questions. And, I'm not the end-all, be-all of this, and I would love to hear anybody else's ideas on how to make this better. Anybody? Yes?
I think it would be beneficial, not just in companies, but in like a user group. So you have your developers, your security groups, have developers come speak in security user groups and vice versa.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, that's a great idea. If anybody could not hear him, he suggested having developers speak at security groups, and that is a good idea. And yeah, I mean, maybe we'd have to think about that only just because, at least in security, everybody seems to be very specialized. So like, mostly it's pen testers dealing with developers, but like, are people in the SOC going to be dealing with developers, or the people in the SOC dealing with the pen testers really, outside of like passing each other on the way to the water cooler? You know what I mean? So like, finding the right people to talk to. I mean, it's definitely a good idea because, like I said, most security folks don't understand the daily stresses of a developer, and it can be a nightmare. And, it's easy for us as pen testers, as security folks, to sit up in the high castle and say, this needs to get done, this needs to get done, this needs to get done. But when the developers are like, dude, I need to like write all this stuff, and these people are paying the bills, and like, what's the big deal if you're popping up an alert box saying 1 on it? Like, whatever. Yeah. All right. I have not found any training that is useful. I've sat through lots and lots of companies' training. I mean, the ones that I found most useful, I'm not going to name any names or anything, are the ones where it would make you exploit something. Like, I like the ones that make you exploit something, but I didn't find anything where it would make you exploit it and then fix it. And I think that would be the most beneficial. And like I said, let's say take something like WebGoat. Create like a unit test against it, and also curriculum for it. So like, like we'll just start with SQL injection. So like, we have a form, it's vulnerable to SQL injection. Okay. Explain the issue. Like give some basic ideas on what a developer could do for it, and then have them do it. Like have them exploit so they can actually see what the issue is. Then sit through like a very brief module on like the fixes. Obviously, okay, yeah, you could do like keyword filtering on it. That's a horrible idea. Like whitelist, blacklist, horrible idea. Parameterization. Have them attempt to do a fix with the source code. So we give them the source code. Have them check it in through like SVN or Get, probably Git because there's the difference there. Run the automated unit test against it to ensure that it's fixed, and then score them on that. So it would be like, teach them the exploit, teach them how to fix it, make them fix it, and then grade it. And so like I said, and I was just like throwing WebGoat out there because it's well known. There's in every single language out there, there's examples of WebGoat and whatever. So just write some unit tests, come up with some quick curriculum on it, and then you can automate the grading, everything. Of course, it's like a huge, up front, it's like a huge work effort in order to implement it. But I think the long run, especially like, that's what's lacking for the developers. Again, it's the cross-site scripting thing, because I hear it all the time. Like, oh, you're popping an alert box. What's that going to do? Like, oh, what's the big deal? Like, yo, you can run a SQL query, but like, you can't really get too far because you're the user. But they don't understand that you're the user as a database. It's not you at that point. Yeah.
So rather than having a developer use a security orchestration, maybe have a pen testing course or something like that to show them how to break it and how to understand
Yeah, exactly. But then also take it a little step further than that and have them fix it, because that's their job anyway, is writing the code. So, having them implement the fixes, and like as they're writing code, they're like, oh, here's a SQL query here. Oh, I know how to avoid a SQL injection issue. I'm getting feedback. So like, I'll just write it from a parameterized query right now. You know what I mean? So like, get them to like actually see it and get them to actually fix it. And like I said, if we can like come up with unit tests there, have it get graded like that as soon as they check it in. Be like, oh, it's fixed. Oh, it's not fixed. Try again.
You don't want to treat the symptom. You want them to understand the core vulnerability.
Yeah.
And work that back in and add that into their development skills, right?
Yeah, and
don't treat the symptom. In other words, if you're pen testing it, don't tell them how you pen test it. Teach them that it's vulnerable to that. Teach them what the base
negative testing before they deploy code over to the other?
None.
How many people that accept code do negative testing outside of a pen test to accept code? Not many. So get that as a habit, change their habit.
Yeah, and get them to understand the risk, because like with SQL injection, I've heard like, oh, well, you're this user, you don't have access to the user tables. Like, no, I'm actually running as the user that you have as the database, the user that's querying the database. They don't understand that. They think like, oh, we wrote this thing that as long as I live in this nice application, it's just you. You don't have access to the user table, As the application, yeah, and like, it's not so bad anymore. But there used to be a time where you could run like most applications ran as like the system administrator on the SQL database. I'm sure it's still out there everywhere. But you know what I mean? It's like, no, I've got full access to your database. I can do whatever I want. But like, but you're logged in as you. You don't have access to that. I'm like, well, that's the problem. Yeah. So like, I mean, if we can engage developers and so that they can actually see the issues, and then also make them fix it so they know how to fix it, it's going to prevent it going in the long run. Like sitting through an hour thing on like cross-site scripting where they're not going to make me do anything. Like, I sit through training all the time and I'm very engaged in all of my training. Yeah, very engaged in all of my training. So like, yeah, but like if we can make them pop the exploit, fix the exploit, grade it against it, but like, oh, you've learned something, and then hopefully next time they're sitting there actually doing their work, be like, maybe I shouldn't like write dynamic SQL based upon random user input. Maybe I should parameterize it. Yeah.
And make them do it in like a centralized component where you can reduce the service.
Of course, yeah.
That's another really good thing to do.
That's why using something like Git or SVN where you could fork it off for like each developer. So like part of like signing up to it is like they create their own fork, and then you would also have a record of what they did and how they fixed it if you needed to audit it. Like, I would audit everything all the time.
Because like a lot of the stuff we saw is like no input validation. Right?
Yeah, oh, of course, yeah, no input validation. All right. Anybody else? Scott, you raised your hand earlier. You just wanted to join in. Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. Anybody? Anyone's going twice? Sold.